At precisely 3 a.m. local time on August 29, 2025, the Russian S-400 Triumph air defense system in Jankoy initiated a new duty cycle. The massive 91N6E radar swept across the night sky, sending out sharp bursts of electromagnetic energy that pierced the Crimean darkness. To the crew on watch, it was business as usual. They still believed they commanded one of the most formidable shields on Earth. What they didn't know was that the radar station, worth nearly $500 million, had only minutes left to live. Far to the northwest, hidden deep in a forest east of Mykolaiv, 155 miles from Jankoy, a camouflaged Kamaz truck stirred under a canopy of leaves. Its hydraulic hatch slowly lifted, revealing a weapon the world had never seen in combat, the Flamingo cruise missile. Conceived by Firepoint Industries, Flamingo was designed to fly low and fast, slipping beneath radar nets with lethal precision. With a strike range of 1,850 miles and a warhead tipping the scales at over 2,200 pounds, it was engineered to obliterate command centers, ammunition depots, and high-value radar systems buried in enemy strongholds. Its coordinates were locked. The exact location of the 91N6E radar belonging to an S-400 battery positioned southeast of Jankoy, near a railway junction once vital for coordinating fire missions across 3 S-400 units guarding Crimean airspace. The radar itself was worth hundreds of millions, but its true value lay in its role as the eye of the sky. It could spot targets nearly 370 miles away, track 300 simultaneously, and guide 80 missiles in flight. Neutralizing it would tear open a blind zone more than 95 miles wide, creating an unprecedented gap in Russia's air defense grid. This strike had been long in the making. For the past 48 hours, Ukrainian electronic reconnaissance teams had silently followed the radar's emissions, waiting for the moment when its fate would finally be sealed. Every pulse of the 91N6ES operating signature was catalogued, every radio tick and cycle logged. All of it came from a single loitering UAV, a Beaver-class kamikaze drone Ukraine had launched hours earlier. Barely more than 110 pounds, the drone skimmed roughly 330 feet above the treetops, following inertial terrain reference navigation like a shadow. It slid through the Podlet K1 radar belt unseen, a nocturnal hunter on a quiet mission. Affixed to its airframe were 3 indispensable payloads: a full electro-optical /infrared camera, a passive signal receiver, and a wideband data link antenna. Beneath the composite skin, a low-power processor swept the electromagnetic spectrum, hunting for a single telltale signature, the C-band pulse pattern of the 91N6E gravestone radar. Then, at 3:07 a.m., the operator's screen erupted. A sharp waveform lit up, active continuous C-band. The Beaver's internal map pinged a hot spot 8 miles southeast of Jankoy, nestled between 2 low shrub clusters, a perfect match with the satellite imagery from a week before. Target confirmed. The radar was transmitting at full range. At a camouflaged firing position near Mykolaiv, the Flamingo strike leader tightened his headset and issued the command, "Initiate target lock." Engineers fed the encrypted coordinates from the Bear UAV into the system. The console flashed green. The sequence was underway. Flamingo sat ready, awaiting a single command. It would need 11 minutes to cover the distance, an eternity if enemy radars found it unmasked. So it would not go alone. It would have a shield, a decoy, a sacrificial lure, all prepped in a choreography Ukraine had rehearsed. At 2:59 and 50 seconds a.m. on the Kherson front, a Ram-2 decoy UAV slipped from a rotating launcher and climbed to 6,560 feet. It tracked along Crimea's western shoreline like a routine airliner before abruptly angling 70 degrees and plunging toward northern Jankoy, the precise sector of the S-400 post. Its flight path and radar signature were intentionally conspicuous, bait to pull the 91N6ES gaze and convince its operators they were tracking an incoming Ukrainian cruise missile. The launch order came at 3 hours 10 minutes and 50 seconds. A soft beep. The hydraulic cradle heaved the 20-foot missile into a 30-degree launch attitude. Seconds later, Flamingo detached, No roar, only a thin, cold smoke line unfurling south across the peninsula. A bold precision strike of 2025 had commenced. Farther out, the Ram 2 completed its final turn and, as planned, entered Russian air defense coverage. It was picked up by a Panzer S-1, which switched to track. 17 seconds later, a 57 × 10⁶ interceptor streaked out and detonated the decoy. The sacrifice paid off. Every radar ping, lock frequency, reaction time, and firing vector was captured, encrypted, and fed back to command, data that immediately updated Flamingo's navigation picture. Encrypted links stream no-go zones, GPS jamming corridors, 3D terrain overlays, and waypoints into Flamingo's guidance map in real time from a tactical UAV relay. The missile ate the first 25 miles in near silence, hugging terrain at an altitude below most ground radar's scan envelopes. It moved at low level with meter-precise terrain following, running thousands of navigation checks per second and cross-referencing the Beaver UAV's map. At 3:13 a.m. GPS guidance faltered as satellite signals were jammed across the peninsula. Flamingo flipped to inertial navigation and terrain-matching algorithms, holding position within acceptable bounds while switching to frequency-hopping probe modes to complicate passive detection. Russian passive spectrum teams scanned and scanned, but the missile's fleeting reflections registered for fractions of a second. For several minutes their networks were confused, unable to positively identify a target, and unwilling to risk a misfire. By then Flamingo had cleared the first kill zone and slalomed along the eastern flank of Assault Lake where terrain radars struggle. It held a low, steady profile, carving a path that looked, from above, like a razor slicing the last seam in Russia's layered shield. Less than 15 miles ahead, two S-300 PMU batteries held the medium-range ring, one near the Northern Army positions, the other guarding the southern shore of Lake Savish. They formed the middle tier of Russia's layered air defense over northern Crimea. For now, the 30N6E fire control radars sat in standby, passive to conserve power. The 3066 search radar carried the early warning burden. Only a confirmed contact would wake the 30N6E and hand it responsibility for lock-on and guidance. That posture had a built-in weakness. The S-300s were tuned for medium and high-altitude threats, fighters, ballistic arcs, high-altitude cruise profiles. Flamingo flew a different song, barely 165 feet above the glassy surface of Lake Savish, skimming over low reflectivity water and minimal clutter. The 3066's waves scattered across the shallow lake, scrubbed by reeds, sandbanks and low brush. Flamingo's echo blurred, a whisper on an operator's scope. By combining ultra-low altitude, a weaving flight path and active countermeasures, the missile exploited a seam in the defense and remained effectively invisible to the S-300 engagement envelope. At 3 hours 17 minutes and 20 seconds the missile had covered more than 105 miles and now faced an interference field around the Kalanka farmlands, where Ukrainian intelligence had mapped at least one mobile RB-341V, Lair 3, jammer truck and an R-330ZH GPS suppression suite. The instant satellite signal strength dipped below -130 dBm. Flamingo cut GPS, locked its digitized terrain mode, and handed control entirely to INS fused with terrain matching and a mini radar altimeter. For 30 seconds it hugged the farms, skimming between crop rows, tracing irrigation ditches and dry streambeds, deliberately avoiding glasshouses, cluster housing and metal storage sheds, any of which could produce a lethal radar or thermal reflection. At 3:18 and 12 seconds AM weak interference blip flickered on screens at the Russian Air Defense Command in Jankoy, then vanished after 2 seconds, too brief to create a track. That night's low fog and high humidity scattered returns even more, ideal for a low-flying cruise weapon. On the Ukrainian side, the Beaver loiterer continued to monitor the 91N6ES pulse patterns. All remained silent. Still, no Russian operator suspected that a missile was now fewer than 30 miles away. By 3 hours 20 minutes and 45 seconds Flamingo entered its most dangerous corridor. The tightly defended approaches to Jankoy were Panzer systems, Nebo early warning radars, reconnaissance UAVs and the 91N6E converged. A single-layer belt lay ahead, a Panzer S-1 posted by a drainage canal, a Nebo M site 4.5 miles out, and finally the 91N6E fire control radar, the S-400's commanding eye. The missile descended to 100 feet and hugged a narrow water channel, shutting down its active radar and going fully stealth. Only INS, driven by fiber-optic gyros and preloaded 3D terrain maps, kept it true. From here, the mission could not be corrected by a human hand. Success or destruction would play out on autonomous systems. At 3 hours 21 minutes and 35 seconds, the reconnaissance UAV's infrared feed showed the 91N6E snap into full track mode, a late detection from the southwest. But it was already too late. Flamingo was 3.5 miles from impact. The Panzer had exhausted its immediate response when it engaged the decoy earlier. S-300 arrays were angled skyward and could not depress to intercept an ultra-low flyer. The 91N6ES Echo arrived too late to pass usable targeting data to the 5P-85T2 launchers. At 3 hours 21 minutes and 49 seconds, Flamingo's turbojet roared to max, the missile surging to 530 miles per hour. It ripped across farmland, shredded through windbreaks, drove through barbed fencing, and 2 seconds later a white fireball bloomed over Jan Khoi. The flash lingered, a mushrooming column followed. The concussive blast rolled outward, shattering windows within a 6.2-mile radius. Recon drones streamed images of the wreckage, the 91N6E vehicle consumed by flames, antenna mast collapsed, command trailers and a power truck burning. No interceptor or counter-battery fire followed. Minutes later, NATO infrared overpasses registered an anomalous thermal signature. Satellite analysis in the 3 to 5 M band recorded a spike to roughly 1,100 degrees Celsius that persisted for 14 minutes, a burn footprint of some 75 feet and hotspots consistent with diesel and electronics burning. Western analysts drew a single conclusion: the 91N6E had been eliminated. Valued at an estimated $110 million, the 91N6E was the crown jewel of the roughly $500 million S-400 battery deployed to protect Crimea since 2017. More than hardware, it had been a nerve center, coordinating target data for Panzer S-1, S-300 PMU-2, Buk M-2 and the Central Crimean EW network. With it gone, Central Crimea, from Perekop to the northern approaches, plunged into a temporary radar blind stretching roughly 93 miles. Critical nodes such as Jan Khoi Airfield, home to Ka-52 attack helicopters, and other nearby assets were suddenly exposed. Kalanka's fuel depot doubled as an artillery staging area. With that long-range warning node temporarily blinded, Ukrainian UAVs and follow-on strikes would enjoy a markedly higher chance of penetration, especially during the first 12 hours, and remaining elevated for 48 to 72 hours after the hit. Moscow issued no formal comment, but semi-official telegram channels, Rybar, Dva Mayora, and Vonner Katino, began flagging unusual activity around Jan Khoi. Locals described a massive nighttime explosion and said military vehicles were being blocked from approaching the site. Operation Flamingo became a textbook on asymmetric warfare. How modest, relatively cheap tools can fracture a world-class defense. A $15,000 reconnaissance loiterer, a decoy UAV under $10,000, a domestically modified cruise missile using Kh-55 heritage, all for an estimated outlay below $300,000. The whole raid unfolded in under half an hour, produced no friendly casualties, required no deep airspace incursion, and left Russia's layered defenses unable to respond in time. From this point forward, every S-400 emplacement faced the same chilling question: is there another Flamingo 11 minutes away?